The long walk back. End of section. This is the longest stretch of the road and the easiest one to misread. From the closed gate forward, every page of the Old Testament, every name half remembered from somewhere, the Bible is doing one quiet thing. God walking a people the long way back toward the home they were made for. Not driving them, walking with them. It takes most of the Bible, and it does not once stop moving in that direction. He starts with one man, not a nation, not an army. One elderly, childless man named Abram, in a city full of other gods, handed a sentence far too large for him. In you all the families of the earth will be blessed. The seed from the garden, the one who would come, the one who would undo what was done, now has a line to come through. From here the whole story narrows to a family. Abraham, then Isaac, then Jacob, then 12 sons, then a people. And all through it, God is not distant. He visits Abraham and eats a meal under his tree. He wrestles Jacob until dawn and lets himself be held. He meets Moses in a bush that burns and is not consumed, which raises a question the story has been quietly raising since its first page, and it is worth stopping to ask plainly, who is this? The God no one can look at and live, how is he also the one sitting down to a meal under an oak? Israel's own scriptures have an answer, and it is older than the New Testament. Look closer. The name Israel's own scriptures used. When the Hebrew scriptures were read aloud in the synagogues, most people no longer spoke Hebrew, they spoke Aramaic. So the reader read the Hebrew and a translator rendered it, line by line, into Aramaic. Those renderings, the Targums, were eventually written down. The practice of rendering aloud is ancient. The written copies we have range from early to late, and exactly how old the wording is in any given place is a question scholars still work over. We will not need to settle it, for a reason that will be clear in a moment. The translators had a problem. The Hebrew said things too close, too physical for the God who fills heaven and cannot be contained. God walked in the garden. God spoke to Abraham. God met Moses. Their solution was consistent. Wherever the Hebrew had Yahuwah acting inside the world, walking, speaking, appearing, covenanting, they did not drop it and they did not soften it. They wrote a phrase, the Memra of Yahuwah, the word of Yahuwah. In the garden where the Hebrew has, they heard the voice of Yahuwah walking. The Aramaic has, they heard the voice of the Memra of Yahuwah walking. Genesis 3:8, the very scene this book began at. Now the most important thing, because it is the rule this book lives by. I am borrowing the word, not the theology behind it. What the translators meant by the Memra, whether only a reverent way of not speaking too bluntly of God, or something richer, has been argued in Jewish and Christian readings for 2,000 years, and I am not entering that argument or resting a single brick on its outcome. What I take is smaller and far harder to dispute, that Israel's own tradition already had a name for the one God's reachable self-expression, and reached for it exactly where the Hebrew showed Yahuwah stepping into the world. The proof of who that word is does not come from the Targums. It comes from the Tanakh itself, the seen Yahuwah of the Theophanies, the angel of Yahuwah who is called God and yet is sent, the word by whom the heavens were made. The Targum is a witness that the category was there, named, in Israel's own mouth. The case rests on the text. Hold one thing very carefully, because everything rests on it. A Memra is not a second God. The translators were not polytheists. They recited the same Shema every Jew recited. Yahuwah our God, Yahuwah is one. And the prophets are merciless on the point. Beside me there is no God. Isaiah 45:5. The Memra is not another. It is the one Yahuwah's own self-expression, the way the uncontainable God makes himself meetable inside the world he made, without ceasing to be the God no one can see and live. God beyond us, and God among us, and still only one God. And there is a face to it. Several Targums replace that messenger too, with the Memra. So the word Israel's own translators used for the one who walked in the garden was the Memra. The one who walked there is the one who called Abraham, met Moses, and is about to walk this entire road. John, opening his gospel, reached for it on purpose. There is a name for him now. It is not a new God, it is the oldest one there is, the Word, and he has been there since the first page. A word before we walk on, for the reader who has been counting, because you were taught this in 3 persons, and you have not heard that word once. Hear what this book is and is not doing. It is not denying that God is Father, Word, and Spirit. The whole road runs on all 3. It is not making the Word less than fully God, nor the Son a creature, nor folding the 3 back into one mask the way the old errors did. The Word stands at the source's side, truly God, truly with him, not a costume the Father wears. That vocabulary was an honest attempt to guard a true thing, and this book is not at war with it. But it is later, and it is borrowed, and underneath it lies something older and native, the one God and his manifestation, walking the garden, named at the bush, enfleshed at last. This book stays with the pattern, where the creed means to guard the one God, and it does. There is no quarrel, only an older way of saying the same Lord is one. Walk on. So keep that with you. When this chapter says God, it means the one Israel scriptures called his word, the same one who walked in the garden, now walking the road out of exile. Watch what he does next. The family becomes a people, and the people end up enslaved in Egypt. 400 years of it. And God comes down. He breaks Egypt open and brings them out to a sea on dry ground. And 3 months later, when they camp at Sinai, listen to how he frames what he has done. It is not the sentence you would expect. He says, I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Exodus 19:4. Not out of slavery and then turned loose, out of slavery and to myself. The rescue was never only about getting them away from something. It was about getting them back to someone, the same walking with that was lost at the garden gate, beginning again. 3 months out of Egypt they camp at a mountain, and God gives them the Torah, his instructions, the commandments. This is the part of the story most people have been taught to flinch at. Rules, law, the heavy thing Yeshua is often said to have come to lift off. Read it in the order it actually happens, and that reading falls apart. They were already rescued. They were already his. He did not say, keep these and I will save you. He saved them and then said, here is how to live now that you are mine. The Torah is not the price of the rescue. It is the shape of the life the rescue is for. Guardrails on the road home, not a toll gate across it. Look closer. Which comes first? The rescue or the rule? The order is the entire argument, and it is right there in the text. The 10 Commandments do not open with a command. They open with a rescue. I am Yahuwah your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Exodus 22. That sentence stands before you shall anything. Grace first, stated as the ground the rest stands on. Then the instructions, as the response to it. The whole Bible keeps this order and never reverses it. Egypt before Sinai, rescue before the commandments. Later, the cross before if you love me, keep my commandments. John 14:15. The vine before the fruit. John 15:4-5. Obedience is never the down payment. It is always the answer. And the people who lived closest to the Torah did not describe it as a weight. The law of Yahuwah is perfect, reviving the soul, rejoicing the heart. Psalm 19:7-8. Oh, how I love your Torah. Psalm 119:97. Yeshua's own brother, who grew up in the same house, called it the perfect law, the law of liberty. James 1:25. The disciple closest to him wrote that his commandments are not burdensome. 1 John 5:3. Moses said plainly, it was not too hard for you. Deuteronomy 30:11. What is being handed to a rescued people is the shape of love with edges on it. Here is what it looks like not to wreck your neighbor. Here is how to rest. Here is how to remember who made you. A father teaching a rescued child to walk does not resent the child. The guardrails are the measure of how much he means them to make it home. Walk on. And then he does something that should stop you cold, given that the way back was shut. He moves back in. He has them build a tent. Exact instructions down to the loops and the thread. And the point of the tent is one sentence, that I may dwell in their midst. The presence that walked in the garden, that they hid from, that a sword had stood between them and, that presence comes down and takes up residence in the middle of the camp. But look at what is woven into it, and where you have seen these before. Look closer. The tent is the garden. Rebuilt, the detail the text lingers on is the cherubim. The last time we saw cherubim, they were the guardians stationed at the garden with a turning sword, keeping the way to the tree of life. Genesis 3:24. Now they are all through the tent, woven into the inner veil. Exodus 26:31. Hammered in gold on the lid of the ark, facing each other over the place where God says he will meet the people. Exodus 25:18-22. The same figures, the same role. Where the holy presence is, the guardians are. The entrance faces east, the direction the garden was entered, and the direction the man was driven. The lampstand is built as a tree, a central trunk, branches, almond blossoms. Exodus 25:31-40. Light in the shape of the tree of life, standing in a guarded garden. And the promise God ties to the tent is, almost word for word, the gardens. I will walk among you, and will be your God. Leviticus 26:12. used of him in Eden, in the cool of the day. But one thing is different, and the difference is the entire rest of the story. In the garden, the presence and the people shared one open space. In the tent, there is a veil. The cherubim are now woven into a curtain, whose whole job is to keep the people out of the innermost place where the presence sits. He has moved back in, but behind a guard with the way in still closed. Carry that exactly the way you carried the shut gate out of Eden. A veil is a guarded way that still exists. A shut door is still a door. The way has not been opened. The text is telling you very deliberately that there is a door to be opened. Walk on. So that is the shape of the long walk. A people rescued to himself, taught how to live, with God dwelling in the middle of them again, closer than at any time since the garden, and still behind a curtain. And they break it, not once, constantly, the whole way through, the way we all do. End of section. They build another god at the foot of the mountain, while the instructions are still being spoken. They want a king like the nations have. The kingdom rises, splits, and falls. God sends prophet after prophet, not mainly to predict the future, but to say one thing in 100 ways. Come home. The way is still open. You are still mine. They mostly do not listen. The people God carried to himself are carried off into exile, away again, east again. And then, silence. 400 years of it. No prophet whose word Israel would add to its scriptures. No new oracle. The road apparently run out into sand. But the promise from the garden has not moved an inch. There is still a seed. There is still a line. There is still a way that was closed and not destroyed. The silence is not the end of the sentence. It is the held breath before the rest of it. That is the whole Old Testament in one shape. Not a rule book. Not a drawer of old stories. Not a different and angrier God than the one in the second half. It is the word of Yahuwah, the Memra, the one who walked in the garden, walking a rescued, stubborn, beloved people, the long way back toward the place they were made for, and refusing, through every failure and every exile, to let the gate be the end. The road has been pointing somewhere the entire time, and when the silence finally breaks, the word does the one thing none of the translators who gave him that name ever imagined he would do. He does not only speak again, or appear again, or send another prophet. The word steps through the veil from the other side, and becomes one of us.